Well, friends, it is my pleasure here on Liberty Dispatch Interviews to welcome our guest, Craig Klein. Craig is the founder and CEO of SalesNexus.com, a leading CRM marketing automation and lead generation solution for sales teams from 10 to 100. He's the author of Inside Out Selling, a guide to growing and managing sales teams. Since 2020, Craig and SalesNexus have focused on helping Christian and conservative organizations and businesses grow and communicate without supporting big tech censors. Craig serves on the board of directors for the Houston Better Business Bureau. Craig is also a board member at Shelters to Shutters, a nonprofit that helps find housing and jobs for homeless individuals in partnership with leaders in the multifamily housing industry. Craig's the father of 3 beautiful children. He's an avid sailor, hunter, and skier, which is interesting considering being in Texas, but you obviously have to head out of there to ski. But nevertheless, when he's not growing SalesNexus or writing, he's probably planning his next adventure. Craig, thanks so much for joining me on Liberty Dispatch Interviews. It's great to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andrew. It's an honor to be here.
So our audience is a little bit familiar with SalesNexus and the relationship that we have. So I'll kind of give a little bit of a very brief history, and then we can jump into kind of what's happening culturally and why the necessity for the sort of work that you're doing and why it is that we are thrilled to be friends and connected and partnering together. So our brief history is that we, like most people starting businesses needing to communicate with subscribers and supporters, we thought, well, the best thing to do would be to create a MailChimp account, because that's what everyone does. They use MailChimp. And so we use that for our emails, and things seemed to be going fine for a bit. And then all of a sudden, we didn't even send the email, but we created a template where someone interviewed someone with regard to adverse events for the COVID shots. And we saved the template. And before we had a chance to send it, we got notification from MailChimp that our account was suspended and for a week or 2 weeks or something like that. Now, leading up to that, we had thought we found out about SalesNexus at a Fight Live Feast conference. You had a booth set up there. And so we thought this is probably a direction we want to move anyway. They're friendlies, they're like-minded. And then this happened. And that basically for us was the confirmation that we need to get out of this relationship with MailChimp and we need to partner up with SalesNexus. And then since then, using the software, using the application in sending emails, in managing, I found it to be you get over the initial humps of learning something new, but then when you do, I found it's very, very user-friendly, very responsive, very intuitive, and then it became easy scheduling and setting stuff. So, I'm personally glad that we found each other and that we're able to work with and promote you guys and support you. And especially so, not just for us, but really what's happening in the broader culture, because everyone thinks that just because President Trump has been elected and Elon Musk bought Twitter and Zuckerberg is now a good guy, apparently, everyone thinks, wow, we've gone past that big tech censorship and, seekers and tracking, and we're good now. Now we're in a free speech utopia where there's nothing to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
Is that where we are right now? Now that all the stars are aligned and all the right people are in power, is that the world we're living in?
I don't think so. I wish it was, but no. To me, the problem is that anytime anybody, doesn't matter if it's Elon Musk or Google or MailChimp or you and me, anytime anybody has too much control over anything, bad things start happening, right? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the IT world that we live in, right? We've let a small handful of companies dominate everything, and that makes it easy for them to manipulate things, when they want to. It's, now that the Biden administration is out and the Trump administration's in, we're getting a lot more transparency into what actually was going down during the Biden administration, right? But guys like me and you, we saw this happening when it was happening. It's just being sort of publicly acknowledged now, right? They were literally picking up the phone and calling these vendors and saying, hey, you know, those Liberty Coalition guys up there in Canada, we don't really like what they're saying. So would you make it stop? You know, and you know, the big tech guys, I don't know, you could rationalize it however you want, but they're going along. They're not putting up much of a fight. That's for sure.
Well, I wonder, do you think, so it appears, at least in the United States, it appears that the cultural winds have shifted a little bit. I think that, and this, I mean, there are many reasons for this. This could be the nature of your Constitution. This could be a little bit more of that American spirit, which is much less compliant than we are up here. But it seems that there's been a little bit of a shift, and the shift has been, you know, Elon with what he's done with X. And then, you know, Zuckerberg has to come out on Joe Rogan and say, hey, now we're the good guys and we're not going to censor anymore. And this seems to be that the play now is we need to be friendly to those who are on the more conservative or right or center right. Do you think, I guess, how much of that do you think is a principled, genuine change of heart among some of these men, some kind of these big tech behemoths and the various companies and platforms that we've already talked about? Or is it the case that once there's another changing of the guard, they'll follow those winds again right back to the way it was 4 years ago? Or do you think we've seen a shift that will last even if you have a crazy lefty who comes into power in the United States?
You know, my heart wants to believe that it's all real, right? That, you know, whoever, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, has kind of had a come to Jesus moment and they're sort of repentant in their own way, right? But the realist in me, I think certainly the cultural winds have shifted. And so, you know, it just makes good business sense for them to follow the wind, right? I think it could just as easily swing too far in that direction, right? To where, you know, a conservative government is leaning on big tech and telling them to censor people for whatever reason, right? I mean,
yeah, flesh that out. No, that's a really good point, and I want you to expand on that, because I think we often overlook that there's an extreme to the right and the left, and I think sometimes we often hand wave the right side of it because those are our friends, and we only bemoan it when the lefties have control of the levers. Yeah. But it's so, I guess, either through example or the actual concerns, what does it look like to have it swing too far to the left where now they are doing the same? It might look different, but really it's the same play. It's the same kind of controlling play. What might that look like? What might those concerns be?
Well, I mean, I guess the real problem, as I see it, is that it's just the same as with the vaccines, right? It wasn't surprising to me that a handful of people in power were, you know, manipulating things to their own advantage, right? That's not new, right? What was surprising to me was that in order to do what they did, there had to be hundreds and thousands of other people in more sort of middle management and even, you know, grunt level positions that were complicit in the whole thing, right? And that's what really shocked me. And I think it's the same thing in tech, right? Sure, it could be Trump tomorrow could pick up the phone and call Elon and say, hey, there's this crazy guy saying something about me on Twitter that I don't like. Would you shut him down, right? And Elon may or may not do it, right? But if Trump wants to do it in any kind of a broad scale or systematic way, then lots and lots of people at Twitter have to be part of that solution, if you will, of implementing that. And, you know, all of those people going along with it is really what shocks me. I think, I don't know the answer. I don't know. I can't imagine working in a business like that and having somebody tell me I need to censor someone like that and just sort of going along with it. I would have left, right?
I when Ron DeSantis was really the height of his rock starism in Florida, there was a moment where he had outright banned any kind of CRT, social justice, critical theory from being taught in, schools. That's what we want. We don't want them teaching it in schools.
Right.
And obviously, at this point, conservatives cheer and celebrate. It's a great win for freedom. But I think people who are truly conservative, small c, and people who really understand liberty look at that and think, well, hold on a second. That's still the state
Yeah.
flexing in an area that doesn't belong to them,
Right.
which is education. And you're right that we have to be careful that it can go so far the other way. And if we overlook it, then once there's a changing of the guard, our enemies will come in and take all the systems we've created and then use it against us again.
Right.
And so we need to be wise beforehand. And obviously, you're thinking in those terms. You're working in this space, which is good. One of the things I hear, and I guess there's been a little bit of a movement, even it might be driven by some fear with AI and as things are growing technologically. There's kind of this movement where, you know what, we need to disengage a little bit more. We need to, unplug and say that's the lefties, that's the devil's playground. All this focus. I'm thinking from specifically from like maybe a Christian biblical perspective. People are thinking, listen, let's just read our Bibles and let's preach the gospel and let's build our families and communities in this whole social media tech world. What's CRM and marketing? What's all these? This is all we just need to do the gospel. How would you respond to that kind of disengagement that says all that stuff, that's all bad stuff? We need to do none of that stuff, and that's how we're going to be faithful in our Christian mission.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's just, to me, that's kind of just checking out of the fight, right? Culture, technology, the human race evolves. It will always happen. And our job as Christians is to be part of it and make sure it's evolving in the ways that we want, right? Mm-hmm. That in a godly way, in a way that the Bible wants, right? And we can't just sit on the sidelines and watch others, take it in their own direction. That's a recipe for disaster. That's where we've been in a way, right?
Absolutely. In every industry, music, media, entertainment, politics, let's just retreat back to our churches. And then the result is the state paying for genital mutilation. Like that's why we're here, because we've disengaged. So then what would you say, or how would you suggest, whether it's the individual, believing Christian in their own life, or whether it's churches or Christian organizations or Christian seminaries, right? I want to speak more to that audience because those are the ones that I can see are kind of maybe leading the way in some of this disengagement, right? And what would we say to them? How is it that, whether it's the use of AI in various ways, whether that's thinking intentionally about social media and marketing and analytics, how can they be used to actually, how can we leverage them to do good work or do good ministry or be effective in the culture? What are the different ways at kind of all levels, the individual, the institution? What are some ways that they can actually, do good work?
Right. Well, I mean, look at the success of your show and what you guys have done over the last few years, right? To me, that's a perfect model for a typical, community church or pastor or leader of any kind, really, to follow, right? Platforms like Rumble and others that make it easy to, distribute your message and not worry about being censored and so on and so forth. and build an audience and so on. It allows you to just take off all the bounds of, trying to be culturally acceptable, right? You say what you want, what you believe. And what I think this cultural moment that we're living in now, what we're learning is that being different, being forceful, being, sort of bravely honest about what you really believe is attractive to people. It works, right? And there's a lot you guys have done so well. Heck, the elections in November in the U.S., a lot of the sort of breakthrough candidates at the national level and also at the local level, they did it by just sort of eschewing the traditional media, news broadcasts and things like that, and showing up on podcasts and having their own podcast and
Right.
using social media, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So let's rewind a little bit. Let's go back in time. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about how you kind of your foray into this work in this area. I mean, has it always been? Is this what you've been doing your entire adult life? Has this always been the case? Like, let's give a little bit of the history of Craig into this kind of work, into the tech space.
Sure.
I'd be curious to hear because I genuinely don't know.
Well, I was, a sales manager in my early career in the energy business here in Houston, and did well. And so I was a consumer of CRMs, right? I was, responsible for setting them up for my team and using them to manage my team. So 20 years ago now, I decided to build a better mousetrap. Now, back then, I was living the typical American business life, meaning I was a Christian, practicing Christian, but that was a hat I put on, at home and on Sunday. But I did not wear it to work, right? But I happily running my business and doing my thing, right? And then, 2020 happened, and all of a sudden, many of us realized how insane the world had become. And I was kind of what really awakened me was that we were using AWS, Amazon Web Services, for all of our hosting of all of our servers and everything back when AWS shut down Parler, which was, the burgeoning social media for the conservatives.
Well, people might not know a little bit about the story, but essentially Parler, because of the kind of coordinated work between Amazon Web Services and Google and Apple, Parler was not only were they not allowed web space, but you couldn't actually download their apps from the Google Store or the Apple Store. At one point, you would have to basically go to Parler's website and then save the homepage as an icon or as a widget to the home, the screen on your phone, and that was the only way to access it. Like there was this concerted effort to push them out of the space, and I mean this kind of flew under the radar, but this was a huge deal for free speech at the time.
Yeah, for sure. And back to where we started this conversation, Parler had really blown up on the scene in reaction to the fact that Twitter was being so censorious during COVID, right? And so it was just growing leaps and bounds. And, of course, the powers that be could not have, a place where like-minded people could talk about such things freely. And so, just like we talked about earlier, a call was made and Parler was shut down. So like I say, we were I was spending thousands of dollars with AWS every month at that time. And when I saw them do that, I just said, I can't keep supporting those people. And so the bad news is, if you're using AWS for an application like ours, getting out is not easy. I learned that the hard way. It took us about a year and a half and a whole lot of money to find an alternative and then sort of extract ourselves from AWS. They have this way of kind of getting their tentacles into every little piece of your code. So it was a very expensive project, but we re-engineered everything, found a partner we felt like we could trust, and migrated so that we could then come back to the marketplace and say, hey, we're CRM and marketing automation, and we can promise you're not going to get censored like you experienced with MailChimp, and so since then, of course, a lot of the customers that are joining SalesNexus are Christian-owned businesses, Christian nonprofits, lots of right to life nonprofits and things like that, and people that have who feel a significant amount of risk that if they use one of these big tech platforms, that one day they might just get shut down.
Well, again, depending on which person pulls the levers of power. Right now, maybe we feel a little safe, but even still, I've noticed that, YouTube they'll still pull videos down, right? We, like, for our show, for example, we just released an episode last week, and we had to rearrange our script because we were talking about the province of Alberta recently commissioned a task force to study all of the ins and outs of COVID, the jab and lockdowns and the mandates, and the task force's findings were basically everything was bad, nothing was good, and it was all to the detriment. Every mandate, everything that the state did. Mm-hmm. So I placed that in the middle of our show, and Matt said, "Well, we actually should rejig the script, put it at the end of the episode, because that way we can put the whole show on Rumble and Substack, and then we can take the first 2/3, put it on YouTube, but cut out the ending." So we're still worried that YouTube will give us strikes in bed. So we're still in that world where it can stuff can still get throttled. People still are experiencing shadow bans. I mean, on Twitter, our X account is also not doing so hot. We've noticed a little bit of decline. So we're still there.
Yeah, on Twitter, I'm sure you see it. There's a lot of concern that even Elon is manipulating things in different ways, shadow banning certain voices and so on, which it goes back to the same thing. To me, the real liberty is when there is a decentralization of power, right? So, in the United States, we have a federalist system. We have, in the education world, we have local education boards that are supposed to be, really in charge of things, right? And that's the vision. I think we've kind of lost a lot of that. But I think that in technology, you have the same problem, right? When we have just one Twitter or just one YouTube, then there's just almost no way its monopoly power is not going to be abused, right? Somehow. If it's, what we see, because we're focused on it, is, political manipulation, right? But the fact that that's going on, I think indicates that most likely there's all kinds of other manipulation going on that we're not looking for. Right.
Yeah. Exactly. You have to assume, right? It doesn't mean you have to crown yourself with a jewel encrusted tinfoil crown to simply assume that there's probably more going on that we don't see than we do see. And I
Yeah.
mean, one example of this would be, and so I'll preface this, even though there shouldn't be any doubt in the mind of anyone watching this, that I am in no way, shape, or form sympathetic or supportive of, neo-Nazi, very alt-right, red pill, kind of hyper manosphere type thinking, which that seems to be a growing trend, even in some Christian circles. That's it's very bad, it's very evil. Don't like it, no good. Okay,
Right.
so at the same time, if you're going to create a social media platform where you will say the only rule is no breaking the law. So if you threaten someone, if you call for acts of violence, if you outright, commit slander or libel, these are laws. I think these are punishable offenses, and so a social media platform should say we're obviously not going to be supportive of people breaking the law. But if you're going to pride yourself on being a bastion of free speech, then you also have to allow these rather vile perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed that some people who I don't agree with on many things, and I think are awful people with awful ideas, and that no one should listen to them. But there was a recent slew of accounts being blocked or suspended because they expressed some unsavory views, which are evil and disgusting. But you can't have it both ways, right?
Right.
And so you can't, and this goes back to the point of when people on the right then control the levers of power. If you're going to say we're a free speech platform, but also this stuff we don't like, even though it's not illegal, we don't like it, then who's to say that a changing of the guard or a changing of someone's mind doesn't undo it? So
Right.
we need to think more carefully about this stuff. What else have you seen? How else have you seen in the present moment, even though again the cultural winds have shifted? How else have you seen, whether it's social media or in big tech and marketing and these other platforms, seen the either cracking down on or people still saying, hey, we are concerned that we're being blocked or banned or suspended or punished for our particular views? Where do you still see that happening?
I mean, it's in all the same places. It just has not stopped. I think we can safely assume that the sort of the midnight phone calls from somebody at the FBI to somebody at Twitter or whatever, that has subsided, but I'm sure it's not completely over, right? Just
Mm-hmm.
like you mentioned a minute ago, there are some very compelling situations where it's when the government has the power to do it, they just can't stop themselves from doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's happening less. But it still happens, I mean, and it's kind of gone underground, right? As we've gotten smarter about it and better at noticing it and reacting to it, they have gotten better at sort of shadow banning people in ways that are less obvious and things. When I'm a precinct chair for the Republican Party here in Houston, and so over the last year, I was involved in helping a lot of different candidates for state Congress and local offices and things like that. And so they're all trying to do their marketing on social media, email marketing, et cetera. And it was extremely common that they would like the story I tell in this case as an example just because it's so clear cut. This gentleman was running for state senate, and he has run a business for years, decades here in Houston, and has built up a really large, high quality list of business owners on, that he can email and promote the different things he's doing business wise. So when he started his campaign last year, he just used the same account in GoDaddy is what he was using, right? To email about his campaign. So for years, and he's got this track record of years and years and years of sending emails and getting a certain amount of opens and clicks and engagement and all of that, right? And all of a sudden he starts talking about his political views and things start going off the rails. It's just so obvious, right? What he and I really did some research to try and figure out what was really going on. And, I can't really say I have definitive proof of this, but based on my expertise in the email world and all the research that he and I did, what I believe was happening is there's, certain internal authentications in every email message that sort of authorize my server to send an email on your behalf and things like that, right? And Outlook and Gmail and other email programs that we use to read email, and they have their AI to put things in the junk folder, right? They look for those authentications. Well, what I've seen in this case that I'm describing and others is that it appears that for seemingly random reasons, that authentication gets broken sometimes. It's inconsistent, but it seems to correlate with political messages about, for instance, the right to life and things like that, right? So, they're doing things that your average person, even if they're a pretty smart marketer, would never even know to look for.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
If your company employs salespeople, you know it's hard to hire, train, and manage salespeople and ensure they succeed. I want you to check out SalesNexus. SalesNexus is the marketing and automation solution that's built for sales teams. It's easy to set up, but has the deep, powerful capabilities that sales teams need. Best of all, the SalesNexus team partners with you to ensure you make it work just the way your business needs it. Oh, and it's probably less expensive than what you're using now. Try SalesNexus free for 30 days at salesnexus.com.
So I want to pivot a little bit to talk about the use of the tools, the use of the technology, and thinking about tips for people who are starting businesses, people who are starting podcasts, people who want to, for whatever reason, they have or they want to grow a platform, they want to be more excellent with what they do, they want to build their organization, they want to build up their company, they want to be more efficient. So I want to talk about some tips and have a little bit of a mini masterclass on that. But by way of segue into that, I'm curious to hear your 30,000 foot view opinion and maybe a more zoomed in opinion with either examples or practical anecdotes regarding AI. I know that's a very broad question, so I'm going to let you take it however you want, and maybe more not AI in terms of we need to be terrified because this is the beginning of Skynet, but right, more as it pertains to this conversation, which it very well might be, but we'll find out soon enough. But as it pertains to this conversation, the use of AI in this space, in this world, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, it goes back to what I've said a couple times here in this conversation. Too much power in too few hands is a bad thing, right? And AI is just another example of that, really. My perspective with AI is different than most people. My first technology job when I was a young man was working for an AI startup. This was, 30 years ago. So believe it or not, there were AI startups back then. We were, these really smart guys that I worked for had invented a neural network that would automatically digitize a well log, which is just a graph basically of, petroleum characteristics as you go down
Isn't
the
that
hole.
30 years ago? Isn't that when Terminator 2 came out? Is that what inspired it?
Around that time, yeah. No, these guys were just super smart and way ahead of their time, and it worked. The product worked really well, but point is, they were doing it all themselves. There were no toolkits you could get from ChatGPT or OpenAI or anybody else. They literally had to figure out how to train their neural net themselves. And so, yeah, I wasn't doing it myself, but I was looking over their shoulders. I learned enough about that stuff to be dangerous, right? And so as the technologies evolved, what we have now with all the chat GPTs, and now what's the Chinese one, DeepSeek and whatever, right? Is these models that have been trained in a centralized way, right? So just taking zillions of kilowatt hours and CPU cycles and all the data on the internet, right? And creating this one master brain, which, number one, that's super expensive. Number two, it certainly has its application. Those tools are really neat to play with, right? And you see a lot of people doing some really practical things with them now too. But I think we're just at the very beginning of all of this. And I think what you're going to find is that because it's so easy now, everybody's going to have their own little chat bot and their own little bot that makes phone calls for them and sounds just like them and all of that, right? But what we're going to find is that's nice and kind of fun and neat to play with, but I don't really want my bot to sound just like your bot. Especially if I'm making calls on behalf of my business, I want to sound different than my competitors, right? Point is, I believe that we're going to evolve to where every company needs to have their own AI that's been trained on their data, and so it thinks like them, right? Which is not technically super challenging with today's technology. It's just not, the business model hasn't been created that makes that economically viable, but it will. And I think, this is back to what we talked about earlier in terms of sitting on the sidelines versus sort of getting in the fight, right? I think it's up to all of us to support those kind of companies, in other words, if I can support a very small AI startup that's doing something neat, rather than sending my subscription money to OpenAI, it's the same as if I was supporting a smaller, more independent search engine versus paying Google, back 20 years ago, right? Where these big models are going to end up, right? We've seen it. We have been there and lived the nightmare. Why do we want to do that again?
Yeah. Well, in all of this discussion, I think that something that we've kind of touched on, but not directly, is the reality of the trade-off of convenience at the expense of things that people like you and I and many people who are much more savvy about what's going on and kind of understand a little more of what's happening in the world of big tech, we understand that the appeal is always for convenience, right? So even in Canada, the ArriveCan app, which was the app that the federal government put together, which was Canada's version of the pilot project that the WEF set out in 2017, the Known Traveler ID program. Canada was an early adopter, along with the Netherlands and I think Air Canada and 2 airports. So there's no reason. There's not a coincidence that Canada is the first country to adopt this digital travel hub where you would put your passport, your health information, all that stuff. So they develop ArriveCan, and the pitch for ArriveCan was always it's more convenient. Imagine all you have to do is flash your phone, and the check mark on the phone means that your passport's been uploaded, your injection status has been uploaded, you've been cleared through customs. And so it's always the pitch for convenience. And I'm sure you would agree that we're constantly having to overcome people who say, but it's not as convenient, it's
Right.
not as easy. So how do we what do we say other than saying, well, do you want your freedoms robbed? What are some other things that you would say to overcome that? I want cheap, and I want convenient, and I want easy, and I want it just the way I've always liked it. And so this new thing, this small startup, this business that doesn't have it as polished as Google, right? The Google suite is so polished,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't want the enemy having my information. So what do you
Yeah.
say to someone who pushes back with that?
Well, I think you can have your cake and eat it too, so to speak. I mean, it's no different than making a decision that, when there's, every month when the farmers market is out at the church, right? To go and shop for your vegetables there rather than at the big grocery store, right? When you do that, what do you find? You find that actually those vegetables are a lot better, right, than what you're getting at the grocery store. And I think it's the same thing with technology, and certainly for technology startups who are maybe wanting to sort of capitalize on this trend that we're talking about, or you know, that certainly has to be the bar. That I'm not going to be just the alternative to Google that's not quite as slick and it's a little more expensive, right? But it's not Google. That's not going to cut it. It has to be better, a better experience, and then people will pay for it, right? And oh, by the way, the fringe benefit is they get to feel good about it because they're not supporting this evil giant, et cetera.
Yeah, and I, one of the things I've appreciated about some of the stuff that I use personally, whether it's my email or cloud storage, is I appreciate the fact that they will tell me up front. They will say, we are not storing your information on third party servers. We're
Yeah.
not selling your information to advertisers. And it is secure, it's encrypted end to end. To me, I think that people would be wise to value that, to put that a little bit higher up on the value chart and say, I might not get the, so I use Proton Mail for my
Mm-hmm.
personal mail for work related stuff. And the reality is, yeah, you use Gmail. I mean, the bells and whistles are, it's just to the moon. It's this behemoth that's been around for a long time. And so there's a lot of ease, even setting up mail forwarding and the DNS. It's super easy on Gmail. They've made it
Mm-hmm.
so easy.
Yeah.
But I don't like the fact that every email I send is open and is stored somewhere on a Google server. And I really like Proton Mail, but I'm willing to take a little bit of that hit and learn something new
Yeah.
and pay for it so that my privacy is
Right.
not exploited.
Yeah, and I switched to Proton Mail myself a couple of years ago, and to their credit, um, like you say, they make it real clear. Their value proposition is, hey, your stuff's going to be private. Period. In the story, but also they have a really cool and easy to use sort of migration tool that'll just
Yeah.
whisk up all of your Gmails from way back, the 10 years that I was using Gmail, right? And now it's in Proton Mail, and I can still search for that email my mom sent me, 10 years ago or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Um,
That's what I found
so
with SalesNexus too. The migration was easy. It was not long and difficult to get everything over, and even like templates, existing stuff, like it was not very difficult to do that. And so once you kind of get over that hump of, oh, you got to change something, you find it's actually really worth it. And whenever I need to, the odd time I need to log into my Gmail account for something, I always find myself saying, I don't like this anymore. Like, I don't
Right.
like, I'm not actually not happy with it. It's too much. There's too much going on. I don't like it as much anymore. I find an interesting effect.
Yeah. I mean, we can wring our hands all we want, but what really should have happened with companies like Google, Facebook, et cetera, is 10 or 15 years ago, the federal government should have been stepping in and breaking them up, because they, they invented the model on the internet of just give it away for free until you own the market, and then you can go crazy and do whatever you want, right? But I think people are smarter now and more experienced. I think that those services that have that business model, they have to make their money on advertising. I think that is getting so pervasive now that there's a backlash to it, and so that's causing people to be more conscious about their privacy and to value it more, and be willing to spend, the $5 a month or whatever.
Everyone has a story of their phone on the table off, right? Screen off, and they're having a conversation about something, and then they open up Facebook, and all of a sudden they see advertisements exactly for the thing they like. Everyone has at least one of those stories.
Yeah.
And people go, that's creepy. I don't like that at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay. So I wanted to move into a little bit of a masterclass ish, talking through what things people need to be thinking about if they're, starting a business, and now we're thinking about our clients, and we're thinking about our users or our subscribers or our customer base, and we're thinking about our audience, and we're thinking about the networking and the customer relations management, which for people who don't know, that's what CRM stands for, right? So, but before that, or leading into that, give a little more detail about, you talk about the beginnings of SalesNexus, but help the audience understand what is SalesNexus really, what are the advantages of it, what's the point of it, who should be using it, and how it is that this is a supremely effective tool for the sort of things that I want to talk about, which is the business, the audience, the customers, the salesperson. So talk a little bit about SalesNexus.
Well, let's see. Probably the best way to paint the picture for everybody is, actually today I was having a conversation with a doctor who's just learning to use our system. Really neat story. She's a medical doctor that's been practicing for a long, long time and been involved in a lot of mission work down in South America. And so she's started this startup now where she's training other doctors to speak Spanish so that they can go and do that kind of work in South America. And so she signed up to SalesNexus because what she's going to do is email these doctors through our system. And then what SalesNexus does, it does that emailing for you, like a MailChimp and other products like that. But then it goes further in that the people that open those emails and click on the links to watch her videos or whatever, our system will alert her and organize those people so that she's still running her practice. She's only got an hour or so a day to do any sort of marketing work for this startup. In that limited amount of time that she has to work with every day, she can jump right in and go, oh, here's the 10 people that clicked and watched my video today. I'm going to call those doctors right now and, sign them up for one of my classes, right? So that's who uses SalesNexus, is any kind of a organization where you need to combine the the outbound emails and text messages, and also have a human-to-human sales or customer support type of relationship with your customer. We'll also keep the history of all the interactions with your customer and, notes about conversations and meetings, proposals that you sent them, and things like that, so that you kind of have that whole relationship 360-degree picture all in one place without needing to spend 10 minutes researching a customer before you pick up the phone and call them. So that's really our value proposition. Most of our customers traditionally have been B2B sales teams, so manufacturer and their salespeople, or a distributor, insurance folks, things like that. But like we talked about earlier, since really it was late 2021 when we finally had extricated ourselves from AWS. And so since then, we work a lot more with nonprofits, like we talked about earlier, right to life type nonprofits, Christian nonprofits.
Yeah, you guys work with the Ezra Institute.
Right.
You guys work with Rocklink Investment Partners. It's friends of ours as well.
Yep. Fight, Laugh, Feast folks.
Yep, the Fight, Laugh, Feast, their email stuff. Yeah.
The Economic War Room. Yeah, and for the same reason, all of those people that we just mentioned, with the exception of Rocklink, I think, but all the other ones, they literally got somehow shut down or shadow banned or something, and that motivated them to come looking for something like what we do. I think that, like I mentioned earlier, we're not expecting that companies will come do business with SalesNexus just because that's our principle. We want our product to be better than what you're currently using, right? What's exciting though is that working with these nonprofits and so on is we're learning about altogether different sort of workflows and use cases that people have, and we're building the product to be better in those areas. And that's exciting, areas that I didn't have prior experience. I can tell you all about what it's like to be a salesperson. I can't tell you much about what it's like to run a nonprofit. And so we're learning a lot about the needs of those customers. There's data services that I had no idea existed that are really valuable in the nonprofit world, that let you profile your donors in terms of, who else do they donate to and things like that we're working on integrating into our product. So when somebody comes to your site and they sign up as a subscriber, you'll instantly know, oh, these folks also donate to these 5 other organizations, right? Just really neat things like that I think will enable some really smart marketing for these nonprofits that tend to be pretty lean and mean, right? They don't have a big, giant marketing staff. It's like you guys. It's a couple of guys and a couple of computers, right? And you're doing everything the hard way. So you got to be efficient,
So I guess maybe if you want to share in more detail or some other examples. So we have, MailChimp's a big, what are some of the other big competitors in this space? Salesforce would be one.
Salesforce, HubSpot.
Yep.
And, just to be sure it's said, Salesforce has canceled a lot of conservatives. In fact, and Christians. In fact, they actually shut down the Republican National Committee in the aftermath of the January 6th craziness. HubSpot has also canceled a lot of people. They shut down the Daily Wire just a year or two ago. So even though those are perceived as more sort of business tools, or not social media or that kind of market, that it's still happening. And anyway,
Yeah.
those
So
are our
those are some of
direct
the big
competitors.
players. So those are the players. They offer their product. They have their pitch. Other than the commitment to not censoring, not canceling, valuing free speech, which again, personally, I think is a very valuable commodity. Not having to worry about that. I mean, I think that that elevates it to a level that should be given much more weight than I think people do. But again, that comes from someone who we've been canceled, we've been banned on YouTube twice, we've been shadow banned, we've been censored. So because I've experienced all of these things, obviously I value it much more because
Mm-hmm.
how ridiculous it is. But you want to have an excellent product. You want to make something that's, we have no, there's this weird thing in Christian circles where the mindset is, listen, you're a Christian, I'm a Christian, so give it to me on the cheap. And I'm not really gonna, pay a lot for it, but it's still gonna kind of be good. So that's a whole cultural discussion that has to be overcome.
Right.
And I think hopefully, I think we're moving in the right direction now. I think that as Christians are re-engaging in media, in tech, in entertainment, in art, we're like Christians starting coffee businesses, Christians starting all these so I think we're rethinking what we need to pay for and what we value. But
Right.
aside from that, other than the very valuable free speech, no cancel, no censor mentality, what are the kind of unique features or the things about SalesNexus that would make someone who is a salesperson, has a sales business, has a startup, has subscribers or has clients, has an audience that they would hear and they would think, "Ooh, that's interesting. That's appealing. I
Mm-hmm.
like that. That could be useful for me." What would some of those things be?
Well, the main thing is the automation, so if I'm customer facing salesperson, customer rep, whatever, I'm on the phone and in SalesNexus, I can update your record, point and click. I change you from a subscriber to a donor, or um, a lead to a customer, or whatever. Um, with SalesNexus, just that change, just checking one box, for instance, can automatically trigger an entire new follow-up sequence, email messages, text messages, and reminders for me to do different things. Or if I'm changing you to a client, maybe it's also a reminder for somebody in accounting to set you up in the accounting system and send you an invoice and whatever else needs to happen in your business, right? So you can really automate the whole front side of your business, the front of your house, so to speak, with SalesNexus. The what we're what we're really trying to do with the system is enable people to focus their attention and their time on building quality relationships with their customers. So I don't want to have to, after we're done with our call, spend another 5 or 10 minutes going and doing things in the system to make sure all the right follow-up happens, right? I want to be able to spend that extra 5 minutes talking to you, getting to know you, asking about your family, whatever, right? Um, and with SalesNexus, that's easy to do without, with most systems, yeah, you can do it. It's going to be a lot more expensive, and it's going to be a lot more complex. It's really 2 or 3 or different modules that you're going to have to set up and make them work together and all of that.
So what? So I want to do a little bit of a personal plug again, a little bit of a personal testimony / recommendation. So, and for anyone who's listening, a couple things. If you've made it this far, well done. A couple things. First of all, I, Craig, if SalesNexus was just like garbage, but it was free speech oriented, and I like you, I, I wouldn't recommend it.
Sure.
I have no bandwidth for laziness and lacking in excellence. And so if it's good, great. if on top of that it has these other things, that's wonderful. So I wouldn't point people to certain things. I wouldn't say, check this app, check this program, do this thing, contact this person. If it was just, I like to say, if it was just sloppy doppy, I don't got bandwidth for that. So
Right.
that's the reality is it is, it is excellent. It is easy. It is effective. So I want to I'll give you a little bit of the final, maybe where people can go, what they can do, how they can connect, maybe a little bit of a final pitch. But my little bit of a pitch for people listening would be, and I want to specifically call out certain groups or certain organizations that I think they need to be thinking about this. The first one I would say, again, given the audience, is if you're a church. So whether your church sends out emails to 100 people or to 1,000 people, and anywhere in between, whether you have to manage teams of volunteers and staff, or if you use planning center for which team is doing music and organizing your kids ministry staff and scheduling and all that stuff that happens in the church administration, and you're thinking, wouldn't it be great to be able to not only streamline but more efficiently and in a more time efficient way be able to do all of that in a way that's clear and easy. If you're a church and you do that, you need to seriously check out what SalesNexus is doing. So number one. Number two, if you're any kind of Christian business organization, even if you're not, obviously, but I want to focus in specifically on people that are like-minded in certain ways. And you have employees, you have customers, you have sales work that you do, you have leads you need to follow up with, you have all these spinning plates you need to manage. I would also highly recommend abandon whatever you're currently doing and connect with what's happening at SalesNexus, what you're doing there, Craig. And also for all those people who are just starting up, whether it's a business or a blog or a podcast or real estate, whatever, and you're thinking, we have this client base, and I want to be able to, like you said, Craig, I want to spend more time building relationships face to face and less time doing the stuff that normally takes up a lot of time. Then regardless of the size of your company, your organization, your business, you're going to want to connect with what they're doing at SalesNexus. And again, that's because it's quality, it's user friendly, it's intuitive, and as I've said before, I put tremendous weight on the not getting canceled, not getting censored, not having your stuff sold privately, not having your privacy compromised. So that would be my recommendation for anyone who's listening. If you're any of those categories, then at the very least, you're going to want to go to salesnexus.com, because you're going to want to find out more about what they're doing and how they can most definitely help your business and your endeavors to grow, to be more effective. So that's my sincere recommendation for you, Craig, to kind of wrap up. Other than the website, salesnexus.com, where can people find you on social media? And maybe a little bit more about what would be your, call to arms, your pitch, as it were, for our audience. Because I think we need to be thinking more strategically about who we partner with, who we align ourselves with, and the sort of platforms and applications and programs that we use. So where we find you, and give us your final, here's why people should be connecting with what you're doing.
Sure. Well, one thing I'll add to what you said, and thank you, by the way, the other thing that's really different about SalesNexus is that we're going to get involved in helping you be successful. We're not just going to, take your credit card number and hand you your username and password and hope it works out. Our customers stay with us 4 times as long as they stay with Salesforce and HubSpot on average. And we think that's why, because we're going to help you get it right and make sure you're successful. That's what I love to do. I love to work with other organizations and help them achieve their goals. So we're good at that. And so you're not going to be on your own. But to answer your question specifically, we created a guide a year or so ago. We call the Guide to Leaving Big Tech. And it's breaks down several little simple things that you can do in your life to get off of these big tech platforms like Gmail, like Google Docs, like your Chrome browser or whatever. And it's simple instructions that aren't going to take you a long time. It's not going to be real painful. We vetted a few alternatives for you. So you can get that on our site at salesnexus.com. It's a free download. You can follow me on Twitter. Craig Klein is my handle, and on Getter also. And, of course, you can find SalesNexus on YouTube and Rumble. It's just SalesNexus. And we have a lot of video content on how to use the platform, but also just how to build strong relationships with your customers.
You guys are on Facebook as well, right? And
we are.
X, yep. Just for people to get the full SalesNexus experience.
Yep.
It's been great. I've appreciated our conversation about big tech and censorship and Christian engagement. And I'm hopeful that there's been some stuff here that's at the very least been encouraging and challenging for people to, like you said a number of times, to get off the sidelines and think now is the time to engage wisely and well. And, you're doing that and we're trying to do that as well. So again, quickly, salesnexus.com. And by the way, when you go there at some point, say, oh yeah, that like strappingly good looking, gray haired Italian man, he sent me to you over at Liberty Dispatch. Make sure you say that, and you use those words specifically. I will not be happy unless you mention
25% off when you.
He's just his olive skin anyway. So just make sure you let them know that you found them through our show or our website or emails or social media. That's how you found out about them. And then, again, for us, hit us up at LD Substack, ldcanada.substack.com. We're releasing stuff there. That's where we're writing articles, where interviews are going, videos are going. Craig, thanks so much. It's been great. It's been great to have you on Liberty Dispatch interviews.
Well, thank you, Andrew. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and thank you for what you guys are doing. You guys have been trailblazers, and I just really respect what you've accomplished and the message that you're getting out there. And I'm just happy to be part of it and to help in whatever way I can.
Yeah, thanks. For everyone, until next time, Galatians 5:1. Liberty Dispatch has been brought to you by SDG Media. If you want to stay in touch with us and all things Liberty Dispatch, join our email list, or support the show, head over to ldcanada.substack.com.